May 1945. The war in Europe is over, but the hunt has just begun. Across the rubble of the collapsed Third Reich, Allied soldiers are moving through checkpoints, displaced persons camps, and bombed-out roads with one mission: find the men responsible. The architects, the commanders, the ones who gave the orders. Most of them are running. One of them is sitting in a British interrogation room, stripped of his uniform, stripped of his rank, stripped of everything. He built the most feared security apparatus in human history. He commanded hundreds of thousands of men. He had the power to end a life with a signature. Now, he is just a number on a processing sheet. This is the story of how it happened. How the most feared man in Nazi Germany was brought low, not by a dramatic military operation, but by a routine checkpoint, a sharp-eyed captain, and a simple medical examination. To understand the collapse of this man, you have to understand what he was. He was not a battlefield general. He was not a politician in the traditional sense. He was an administrator of terror. Methodical, patient, precise. He understood that power does not come from shouting. It comes from files, records, and the quiet machinery of enforcement. He built the SS into an empire within an empire. He controlled the secret police. He controlled the concentration camps. He controlled the intelligence networks that reached into every corner of occupied Europe. When people in occupied countries disappeared in the night, it was because of the system he designed. He was not impulsive. That made him more dangerous, not less. But in the final months of the war, something changed. The system he had built began to collapse around him. The armies were retreating. The camps were being liberated. And the man at the center of it all began to make desperate, delusional decisions. In the spring of 1945, he made a move that shocked even his closest subordinates. Without Hitler's knowledge, he opened secret negotiations with the Western Allies through a neutral intermediary. His offer was staggering in its arrogance. He would surrender German forces on the Western Front. He would keep fighting in the East, and in return, he expected the Western powers to recognize him as a legitimate post-war partner. He genuinely believed this was a reasonable proposal. When the news leaked, it reached Hitler in the bunker beneath Berlin. The reaction was volcanic. The man who had been called the most loyal of all loyalists, the faithful one, had gone behind his back. Hitler raged. He stripped him of every title. He ordered his arrest. In a matter of hours, the second most powerful man in the Third Reich had become a fugitive wanted by both sides. He had to disappear, and he had to do it fast. He started with the face. The round glasses came off, the immaculate uniform, the silver insignia, the symbols of everything he had built, all of it went into a bag and vanished. He replaced it with the rough, worn uniform of a low-ranking sergeant. He had a patch placed over one eye to alter his silhouette. He shaved the mustache that had appeared on thousands of wanted posters. He obtained forged identity documents under a false name, a dead man's name, someone executed months earlier who could no longer contradict the story. He gathered 2 trusted aides and began moving north on foot, blending into the streams of soldiers and refugees flooding the roads of a shattered country. The plan had a fatal flaw he did not see. British intelligence had circulated a specific order to checkpoint units across northern Germany. Any individual carrying credentials from the secret field police was to be detained immediately, no exceptions. The very documents he had chosen as his cover were the ones flagged for arrest. May 23rd. A checkpoint at a river crossing in northern Germany. British soldiers from a field security section are processing the flow of people moving across the bridge. They have seen thousands of faces: soldiers, civilians, refugees, deserters. They are tired, but they are watching. 3 men approach. They are wearing long gray overcoats. Nothing about them screams important. One of them is short, slightly built, with an eye patch. He hands over his papers without making eye contact. The soldier looks at the documents. He looks at the stamp. He looks at it again. The papers are too clean. The ink is too fresh. And the man holding them, his hands are smooth, his face is well fed. He does not look like someone who has been sleeping in fields for 2 weeks. Get in the truck. The 3 men are taken to a civilian internment facility outside Lüneburg. The camp is processing dozens of detainees, but the duty officer notices something almost immediately. The small man with the eye patch is being treated differently by the other 2. They carry things for him. They move out of his way. They watch him with a deference that makes no sense for a low-ranking sergeant. The duty officer decides to interview him personally. This is the moment. The prisoner is brought into the office. He is quiet. He is watching the officer's face, calculating. The disguise is unraveling, and he can sense it. He makes a decision. He reaches up and removes the eye patch. He places his round, wire-rimmed glasses on his face. He looks at the British officer across the desk, and he says his real name. He expects a reaction. He has always produced a reaction when he enters a room. He expects urgency, calls to superior officers, perhaps even a kind of grim respect from a military man meeting another military man. The officer looks at him for a moment. Then he says simply, "Right, sit down." No ceremony, no recognition of rank. The head of the SS is directed to a chair like a clerk waiting for a form to be processed. Within the hour, the call goes up the chain of command. Senior intelligence officers are dispatched. The instructions are clear and immediate. Search him thoroughly. He may be carrying poison. Do not give him a moment alone. They stripped him of his clothes. He protested. He cited his rank. The soldiers did not stop. A medical officer was brought in to conduct a full physical examination. The search of his clothing turned up a small brass container. Inside it, a glass vial. Cyanide. It was removed and set aside. The doctor turned to the prisoner and told him to open his mouth. He opened it. The doctor leaned in with a light, and there, pressed between the inside of the cheek and the teeth, was a second capsule, smaller, harder to see. A backup. The doctor reached toward it. What happened next took less than a second. The prisoner jerked his head sideways. He bit down. There was a faint crack as the glass broke. The room erupted. Soldiers grabbed him. They tried to hold him upside down. They forced water into his throat. The medical officer worked frantically to reverse what had already begun. There was shouting, movement, someone calling for more help. Cyanide does not wait. Within 15 minutes, it was over. The man who had organized the deaths of millions died on the floor of a British interrogation room under a military blanket in the middle of a chaotic and undignified attempt to keep him breathing. He had cheated the courtroom. The British commanders were furious. They wanted a trial. They wanted the evidence read aloud before the world. They wanted a verdict on the record. What they had instead was a body. They photographed it immediately, not for history exactly, but as a statement. They released the images to the press, stark and unglamorous, a man dead on a floor with no ceremony and no honor. They wanted the German population to see exactly what the end of this story looked like. Then they addressed the question that would define the final chapter. Where do you put him? Intelligence officers were clear on the risk. A marked grave in any identifiable location would become a site. People would come to it. Some of them would come to mourn. Some would come to honor. The symbolism of a grave, any grave, was too dangerous to allow. The decision was made at the senior level. There would be no burial record, no chaplain, no ceremony of any kind. May 26, 1945. Before dawn. 4 soldiers loaded a body wrapped in army fabric into the back of a truck. They drove out into the heath outside Lüneburg, a stretch of moorland and old forest where the roads disappear into trees. They drove until they were somewhere that looked like nowhere in particular. They dug a hole. They placed the body inside. They covered it. They scattered leaves and brush over the ground until it looked like the rest of the forest floor. They drove back. They told no one where they had been. No coordinates were recorded. No marker was placed. The location was never mapped. To this day, the exact burial site has never been confirmed. The man who built monuments and castles and envisioned a permanent SS order stretching across Europe lies somewhere under the roots of anonymous trees in northern Germany. He has no grave. He has no stone. He has nothing. There is a certain justice in the way this story ends, even if it does not satisfy the way a trial would have. He wanted to be remembered as a figure of historical weight. He wanted to be the man who negotiated with Eisenhower, who helped shape the post-war order, who remained relevant even after the collapse of everything he served. Instead, he was processed at a checkpoint, identified by his deference from two subordinates, searched by a military doctor, and disposed of in an unmarked hole. He spent his life building a system designed to make people disappear without a trace. In the end, the same thing happened to him.